Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Your Mark on the World show. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe. I'm a Forbes contributor covering social entrepreneurship and impact investing. And today's guest is LeAnn Thieman. She is a remarkable social entrepreneur who is also a New York Times best-selling author of Self-Care for Healthcare and a renowned, internationally recognized public speaker. So you don't want to miss this episode.
Welcome to Your Mark on the World, bringing you another changemaker with champion of social good, Devin D. Thorpe.
LeAnn, welcome to the show.
It's my joy. Thank you.
Well, the joy is all ours, I assure you. We're thrilled to have you. You do so much good for so many people. You've inspired so many. But I think we should probably start with your claim to fame, as it were. For better or worse, you almost accidentally ended up in Vietnam at the end of the war rescuing babies. Tell us how that came about and what happened.
Well, I like to say, actually, my only intention was to buy a dozen cupcakes to support the orphans of Vietnam when I stopped at that bake sale. But I ended up being a member and developing a chapter in my basement of Friends of Children of Vietnam. And we raised money and supplies to send to the war orphans in the 70s. When they had 6 babies ready for adoption, I agreed to fly to Vietnam and escort them back to their adoptive homes in the United States. But between the day I said I would go and the day before I arrived, the bombing went from 100 miles from Saigon to right outside the city limits. And when I got there, I was greeted with the words, "President Ford okayed Operation Baby Lift. You won't help us take out 6 babies, you'll help us take out 300. And that was a part of, that's why I say I was accidentally caught up in it. I was in Vietnam only 5 days. But on the 5th day, we did load hundreds of babies into open cardboard boxes, strapped them in the belly of a C-141 cargo jet, and headed for the United States.
Wow. Along the way, you met someone special. Tell us a little bit about that.
I did. My husband, Mark, and I had applied for adoption of a son through this organization that we expected in 2 or 3 years. That was part of my motivation in agreeing to go, I think, knowing that it would mean something to him someday. But when I got there, they told me that because of Operation Baby Lift, I would be assigned a baby, or I could walk into the next room and choose a son. And I walked into that room of 100 babies, and as you've heard me say, Devin, Mitchell picked me. He literally crawled across the room into my arms, my heart, and our family.
Such a special story, such a special story. You really are a remarkable individual. I had the opportunity to hear you speak at the National Speakers Association convention last summer. And you're just an inspiring individual. I got to spend more time with you recently here in February when you visited our NSA chapter here in Salt Lake. Kudos to you for all the great things that you've done. It is interesting to me that you were able to make a transition from being a nurse to being such a successful author and speaker. What was the hardest part of that transition?
Well, it was all new to me. I was quite happy being a nurse and mom. And when 18 years later, I finally wrote my story of Operation Baby Lift, it got published. And then organizations began asking me to speak, my nursing colleagues. And I said, about what? I'm not a speaker. And they said, lessons you learned from Operation Baby Lift. And that's when I wrote a speech and then a book and built a career around balancing life in your war zones. I believe we have to be strong of mind, body, and spirit to cope in the war zones of our everyday lives. And so the biggest challenge of all of that was beginning an entirely new career in my 40s when I was quite happy being a mom and nurse, and I had to learn how to write and how to speak. But I knew that was my next calling, and I'm so blessed to be able to do it today.
Well, we're blessed by it. Now, tell us a little bit of the substance of Self-Care for Healthcare, your book, and I think that is really the message you share with people in the nursing community as well.
It is. Well, I wrote my book, Balancing Life in Your War Zones, and it starts with every chapter a bit of Operation Baby Lift. And then when I stopped to learn a lesson, I stopped to teach it. And hospitals were beginning to ask me for more than just the book, for websites and webinars and workshops. So I actually turned it into then a 12-month self-care for healthcare program. And I have 2 editions of it. The first book does begin every chapter with Operation Baby Lift. And the second book begins with stories from Chicken Soup for the Nurse's Soul, which I wrote, and Chicken Soup for the Caregiver's Soul. But there's 12 chapters in the book, 1 for every month of the year. And we spend 1 month working on a self-care tool, 1 month perhaps on breathing and positive thinking and laughter and forgiveness and connecting with your higher power and caring for your body with your diet and exercise. And because it takes 21 days to change a habit, we spend 1 month on each of these topics. And there's a video each month of me introducing that month's lesson. Then everybody reads their book and answers questions in a workbook format in the end of each chapter. Then they get a Monday morning motivation from me in their email box. And an engagement thing is really increased because we then have a champion activity and a self-care for healthcare bulletin board on every department. So if you can imagine everybody working together on caring for themselves and each other with these activities and sharing the videos and the emails each week and month. And I'm just astounded. We've had some tremendous success with it already, and it's only been around for a few years, but noting 20% increase in engagement and 16% decrease in sick days and 13% increase in retention. Because of what we've always known is if you take really good care of the nurse and caregiver, that's the best way to take good care of patients.
Oh, it really is, sounds like a wonderful, wonderful program. As you think about what you're doing today, what has been the key to your success?
Probably stubbornness. I never give up on something I absolutely believe I'm called to do. So I have been very tenacious. I do believe in a higher power, and I turn it over every day for that kind of guidance because I have no idea what I'm doing most of the time. But I always have the most wise people, such as yourself, put in my path to show me the way along the way and to guide me in this new career. And I've worked with some of the most outstanding leaders in healthcare and educators on how adults learn and how to work with and help leaders and the C-suite. So it's just been amazing to have all these wonderful people in my path that show me how to create something that has turned out to be as successful and as marvelous as this.
Well, you are amazing. You are inspiring. I want to go back in time again, if you don't mind, just because some of these aspects are so fascinating. But you wrote a chapter for Chicken Soup for the Soul, or one of the Chicken Soup books, and then somewhere along the line, you got a call from Jack Canfield himself asking you to help write more books. Tell us about that. I mean, must have been quite an event.
Well, it was. I had to learn to be a writer, so I had taken every kind of course and seminar and workshop and retreat and bought the books and to learn how to write a true personal story, to write my own book about Operation Baby Lift. So then I wrote my own story, and when it got in Chicken Soup for the Mother's Soul, I was just astounded. I thought that was the best thing that could ever happen. And then I was hooked on writing people stories. And so anytime I heard somebody's story at a party or a picnic, I would say, can I write that? And send it to Chicken Soup. And they started buying my stories for lots of their other books. And by then I was speaking a lot to nurses. I think by then I had quit my day job and was doing that full time. But I was still astounded when Jack Canfield called and asked if I would co-author Chicken Soup for the Nurse's Soul with him. And this was back in the year 2005. And at the time, it hit number 17 on the New York Bestselling list, which all by itself. Now, we kind of know how to manipulate some things to try and help those numbers. But that was really amazing that it did. So after that, then I wrote Chicken Soup for Caregivers because I knew that was another great need. And then Chicken Soup just blessed me with 14 more titles of the Chicken Soup series.
Wow.
Yes.
So from your first go at being an author till now, what is it, 15, 16 books? What's your total?
Altogether, 21.
21. Holy
Yes.
cow. Uh, that's a lot of work. It makes
I
me
shake my
tired.
head. I've been doing this 20 years and I'm thinking, wait a minute, I've written 21 books. And so, yeah, I shake my head and wonder as well.
Wow. Well, your family has grown since Vietnam. It's hard for all of us to believe that can remember it, that Vietnam ended, 45 years ago, 46 years ago. It's been a while. So your kids have grown up. Tell us a little bit about your family now.
Well, thank you. I love to talk about them, of course. At the time of Operation Baby Lift, we had a 4-year-old daughter, a 2-year-old daughter, and then Mitch came at 9 months old. And now our oldest daughter lives just an hour away in Denver. I live north of Denver in Fort Collins. And she's married to a wonderful man, and we have 2 grandchildren there. And my other daughter lives in Fort Collins with 12 minutes from my house, not that I'm counting, but 12 minutes. And she has 2 children in elementary school that I see very frequently. Our son Mitch is still single, and he works with websites and computers in Austin, Texas.
Wow. Well, LeAnn, you've done so much. I mean, and you've been so incredibly successful. It seems in every aspect of your life, as a mother, as a consultant, as an author, as a speaker. My heavens, what's the most important lesson you've learned?
I think probably, well, I have to say to count on a higher power, because that's how I get through everything. But I think the lesson that I've learned really is what I nag people about, and that is we really have to take really good care of ourselves, our minds, our bodies, and our spirits in order to make the difference we want to in the world. And so I am all about our own self-care, and I think often we neglect that too much because we put other people's and other projects before that. So I think that's probably the biggest lesson that I continue to learn and work on myself as well.
LeAnn, I think about the turn your life took. But when you were working as a nurse and you started telling your story and people got interested in it, you could quite realistically have said, that's my story. I'll keep it to myself. I'm a nurse, and continued on that path. But instead, you chose a different path. You accepted the invitations to become a speaker and to become an author. And as a result, you've helped infinitely more people than you would likely have helped as a nurse. How did you make that decision? How did you make that choice? Why did you make that choice?
Well, I often say working in healthcare is a calling. And clearly this second part of my career was a calling. And I thought it was going to be a hobby. And bless my loving husband, Mark, of 48 years, our nest was about to be empty. And he had this wonderful ideal thing that I was going to stay home and start quilting. And God bless him when I started doing this hobby of speaking. But the thing is, Devin, the audience reaction just blew me away. When I saw the response and realized that there was something I could say that was going to help them in the way they told me it did and inspire them and to take care of themselves and to make a difference in the world, that fed me. And it does to this day. And you know that as well as a speaker. Your audiences feed you back. And every time I gave a speech and I got that feedback, I knew that I was right where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what my purpose. And you and I've had discussions about our purpose in life and finding that purpose. And I call them life assignments sometimes, and sticking to those life assignments. And it's absolute joy and privilege to do what I do.
Yeah, I think I find myself laughing and crying, both thinking about you doing what you do instead of quilting.
And I still haven't made a quilt.
I don't know whether I'm glad to hear that or not, but I think I am. I know the difference you've made in the world, and
thank you.
I'm glad you didn't spend your time quilting. LeAnn, thank you so much for being here. One last question for you. What is your superpower?
My superpower? Oh, that's a really good question. Maybe tenacity. My husband might call it stubbornness. I call it tenacity. We'll go with that.
Okay. I think that is a very powerful superpower. So thank you. Well, LeAnn, before you go, tell us how people can learn more about self-care for healthcare and connect with you personally.
That's very easy. selfcareforhealthcare.com. And on there is my contact information as well. My name is LeAnn Thieman. And I'm just LeAnn at LeAnnThieman.com. And I would love to hear from people and see how I can help.
Fantastic. Well, LeAnn, thank you again. We love you and thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
It's my privilege. Thank you.
All righty. Let's do some good.
Thank you for listening. This podcast was recorded via Google Hangouts on Air and is available at youtube.com/Devin Thorpe. Subscribe to this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes by searching for Your Mark on the World. Every weekday, Devin hosts a CEO, celebrity, entrepreneur, or other changemaker here on the Your Mark on the World show to inspire and prepare you to make your mark. Devin is a champion of social good, writing about, advocating for, and advising people who are doing good. He is a Forbes contributor who is a recognized thought leader in social entrepreneurship, impact investing, and crowdfunding. To book Devin as a speaker, visit devinthorpe.com. Learn more about Devin's work at yourmarkontheworld.com.